Welcome to another episode of Not That Hard to Homeschool, the podcast for real people so that you can confidently, competently, and yes, even contentedly provide the high school education that is best for your teens and your family. I'm your host, Lisa Nearing from NotThatHardToHomeschool.com. Hey, everybody, this is Lisa, and I'm so excited that you're here to listen to another episode of our podcast. Today, I have a special guest, Lisa Yvonne, live from Europe, and she's going to talk to us about her new curriculum and what she's doing for the homeschool community. So, Lisa, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Yeah. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself because I think it's more exciting to hear from the person than to have me read off a script. So just tell us a little bit about your background as you parent and homeschool and travel and all the things.
Okay. So, first things first, I have 8 kids. We have been homeschooling for 20 years, and I love homeschooling. My husband and I have been married for 23 years. We met back when we went to Bible college together, and we got married after serving in youth ministry together. It has been an adventure ever since then. We currently live abroad with our kids, and so we get to do some traveling. They're learning other languages, other cultures, things like that. We absolutely love it. Our youngest is early elementary, and our oldest is already a homeschool graduate. We have kids who are neurodiverse. We have children with physical handicaps. We have kids who are super creative and STEM minded, children who are super bookish and love to just walk around reading all the time, everything in between. We're a really, I think, a fun family to hang out with. And we absolutely love the family togetherness and the freedom that homeschool has brought to our lives.
I love it. Well, you just described a typical homeschool family, I think. You have kids that run the gamut of bookish to non-bookish, typical to atypical. One of the ideas I've gotten a hold of this year is that we're all jagged learners. And I love that idea that there's nobody who's just really, super, super even. We all have some kind of like something going on, which we're all individuals, and that's so, so cool. So in the midst of your busy life, you decided to write curriculum because
Yeah,
you were busy
so,
enough. How did that happen?
well, back when I decided to homeschool, we had actually not really planned on being a homeschool family. I had been a mother's helper for a homeschool family in a high regulatory state and thought, oh, this is really stressful. And
Yeah,
I don't think I could do this. And she also had a large family.
yeah,
At the time, I was taking our first child to enroll her in school, and she looked at me and she was like, I'm gonna have to leave you. Like, what's going on? And I was like, I can't do this.
yeah,
Surely I can homeschool kindergarten.
yeah,
And we just made the commitment for kindergarten.
yeah.
And I bought this super expensive box curriculum. I had to sell a bunch of stuff at a yard sale, save up for it, order it. 2 weeks in, she was crying. I was crying. It sat on a shelf until I sold it at a curriculum fair to
Yeah.
another homeschool mom who also thought she needed a big, expensive box curriculum.
Yeah.
And we just did it ourselves. I was like, okay, I can do homeschooling for kindergartner, right? I can read books. I can help her explore the world. I got my hands on what she needed to learn, and we did it.
Yeah.
And I didn't think we were going to have more kids. Then along comes number two, and I was like, well, it's okay. We're still homeschooling. We actually never got around to enrolling in public school.
Mhm.
And so we'll just homeschool him too.
Yeah.
Now, at this time, our firstborn is 7 and our youngest is 5. Our firstborn still isn't reading well. She's really struggling, and he has taught himself to read at the age of 3 and is reading like third and fourth grade books at the age of 5.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, okay, these two kids are really different,
Yeah.
really different. And I'm parenting them the same way. I'm teaching them the same things, and their brains just work differently from each other.
Mhm.
Along comes number 3. Then we throw some adopted kiddos into the mix with all kinds of other experiences that add to the mix. And we really got this variety going on.
Yeah.
And then we got to number 7. And number 7, I could not find a curriculum that worked for him.
Mhm.
I tried everything. And so the curriculum that is on our website right now is kind of a conglomeration of the styles that have worked for us over the years in a very simple design. Because what I learned from my 7th son is that really busy curriculum overwhelmed his brain.
Yeah.
Also, it's an ink saver. Like, I love that.
Yeah.
My frugal self is like, oh, we can save money too. But it really overwhelmed him, and he just needed simple.
Yeah.
And we got to the point where we realized we didn't want to spend hours a day in books doing school at the table
Yeah.
when they were younger. We wanted to get school done and explore the world.
Yeah.
And so the Moments at Home was designed to create a easy button for mom
Mhm.
and a curriculum that kids look forward to getting into that doesn't overwhelm their brains
Mhm.
with all of the busy details on a page.
Yeah.
Because believe it or not, that can be so distracting
Right.
and just gives them what they need to learn in a way that is fun and engaging and not so overly academic that it sucks the joy out of learning because we want to raise lifelong learners. We
Yeah.
want to raise kids who look forward to school.
Yeah.
And so this was the curriculum that we created.
Yeah.
The goal is that you can do it in 20 minutes a day at the table, and you don't even have to do it all in one 20-minute session,
Yeah.
and that you can cover the foundations and fill it out with read alouds and board games and playing in the backyard and going
Yeah.
on nature walks and visiting your local library and doing all the things that you wanted to do as a homeschooling mom,
Mhm.
but maybe wouldn't have time for if you were using one of those more rigorous, huge, expensive,
Yeah.
intensive, prep heavy, cost you sleep at night curriculums.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple things, simple design, and I love that because if you go to Instagram, you can see the most lovely curriculum, but I think it can be very distracting for our kids. I mean, for us moms, we're like, oh, this is so beautiful. Our kids will love it. And they might love it, but it might honestly distract from the lessons. I've worked with autistic kids, and one of them in particular had a math curriculum with a Bible scripture lesson on the page, and he couldn't ever do math because that scripture just distracted him. He couldn't figure out how it had to do anything with the math problem, and it just shorted him out. That was it for math for him. So I think our kids need more simple more than we realize, and we live in such a busy, noisy, visually stimulating world that simple can be really healthy for their little brains. They just
Yep.
don't have a lot of files for some of that. Um, the other thing you said is just doing things like board games and reading and things that we consider non-academic that are really help your kids develop things like collaboration, critical thinking, communication, and creativity. One of our most hit on pins on Pinterest is a blog post I wrote, 50 our 50 most loved board games by genre, because we love board games. And I mean, it's gotten thousands and thousands of views. So people are still looking for board games, and don't overlook the incredible educational power that brings to your kids. Such great, fun, simple learning. Um, so you're doing this with your kids. Have you simplified for all of your kids as you've homeschooled? Is that kind of a hallmark of your homeschooling?
We definitely believe in homeschooling to the child's strengths.
Mm.
And so most of our core curriculum looks the same. So
Mm.
they use that really simple curriculum through elementary school. In junior high, they have a little bit more intensity, maybe
Mhm.
not quantity, but definitely
Yeah.
intensity.
Yeah.
And then we start encouraging them to hone in on their gifts and their interests. You know,
Yeah.
this is when one of my sons started woodworking,
Yeah.
when my daughter wrote her first novel,
Yeah.
things like that.
Love.
We really give them the space to be creative. And, you know, I used to think that that meant spending a ton of money and we were, you know, not well off, but it didn't. It just meant giving them space and time,
And
right?
intention. I listen, you're
Yeah.
in my song, Lisa. This is what I've been telling everybody in my workshops as I'm going to convention season. Help your kids really develop a standout factor. And it doesn't, some of us have the means to help our kids be Olympic gymnasts. Not very many of us, let's be honest, because that's like a whole salary right there. But you know, you have 14,000 hours before your kid graduates. And Malcolm Gladwell made this famous. You can become an expert in 10,000 hours. So really your kids could be expert and a half in something else by the time they graduate. And why shouldn't they be? They need to be a solution to somebody's question. That's how they're going to be really marketable and have job offers and be able to serve the wider community of humanity in the world. You know, that's what all of us have done at some point in our lives. So I love that you're really giving your kids the space to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, one of the things that we learned that I think I got wrong in the beginning is that I thought that to give them that space, I had to enroll them in classes so they could figure out what they were
Yeah.
passionate about,
Yeah.
right? I thought that I had to fill their time and give them these opportunities, like put them in this class and then try this workshop and do this
Yeah.
thing. And what I realized, I think John Holt was
Yeah.
probably the one that really opened my eyes to it, I think, when I was reading some of his books, but was just letting them be bored. The
Yeah.
power of boredom is so underappreciated today.
Mhm.
But when you let your kids be bored and they have to innovate, you don't give them a screen to fill that time.
Yeah.
And like for us, our kids love using YouTube to figure out things that they can't do.
Yeah.
We had a child who made an entire machine the other day out of paper,
Wow. Super
cog,
cool.
gears, everything, and it turns.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, but he couldn't get past one point of it. So he was like, hey, can I go on YouTube and check that out?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. Like, go do that.
Right.
But they're not sitting there watching. They're
Yeah.
starting from some point and then they're problem solving with it because those passive resources, the things that require them to be the active engager,
Yes.
that to fill their boredom,
Yeah.
it's the best part of homeschool.
Yeah. And by passive, you mean things like books and people. That's what I really am hitting
Books,
the
people,
part too.
even blocks like
Yeah.
Legos,
Yeah.
Jenga blocks,
Yeah. Wow.
and places to go visit, like
Yeah.
just taking them to the library and then seeing where they naturally gravitate and
Yeah.
what gets their attention,
Yeah.
bringing them to the park and watching how they engage with people. They're the ones who are the main character in the story. But when
Yeah.
we put them in front of a curriculum or in front of a video or in a class, there's a teacher guiding what they're interested in.
Yeah.
There's a video telling them what's going to grab their,
Yeah.
dopamine receptors, whatever. And they're not choosing, they're not the active part of the story anymore.
Yeah, they're not the agent. They're not the yeah, personal agency. I want to just reiterate this. Letting your kids be bored means taking away screens because they're not going to be bored. Their brains are going to be stimulated if you give them a tablet or a phone or a screen. And here we are online. So I'm not against screens. I'm saying manage it as a tool. Don't let it take over your life. Um, I love that too. I think the other thing about giving your kids space too is letting them decide that they want to really invest in certain things, which means they might not have time to do other things. And we talk about typical course of study all the time at True North, and it's not that hard, like math, English, science, history, the core four, and electives and stuff like that. But if you have a kiddo who says, and this is a real life example, my youngest said, I really want to focus on languages in high school. And so she graduated fluent in Hebrew, conversant in Spanish, she can hold her own in German, but she only did chemistry as a science in high school. So if your kid really hones in an area, you're going to maybe have to make some choices. And that is okay. Like Lisa and I both give you permission to make those choices because they can always make it up later. We are not all like, as adults, we've all focused on certain things and let other things go, right? And so letting our kids do that even at younger ages develops their sense of personal agency and develops their skills. And your kids need skills in this crazy disrupted world right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We look at it, you have the core four. We look at our curriculum as the foundational three.
Hmm.
So every curriculum is strong on reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Love it.
Um,
Yes.
because what they can take with those are the building blocks of being able to find other knowledge,
Yeah.
right? Like once they've mastered that, they can find any information they want. We definitely cover social studies and science, and we're working on growth mindset tools to roll out in 2025 that I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
Um, Probably from a slightly different perspective than exists because family is at the core of it.
Yeah.
Um, but all of those things matter. But really, our focus is getting kids who love learning.
Yeah.
So they're not getting we talked about the dopamine and keeping their brains busy.
Yeah.
They're getting that from finding information.
Yeah.
They're getting that from learning a new skill. They're getting it from discovery and not from necessarily acquiring something. They're not getting it from even saying, hey, I accomplished this, so therefore I'm proud of myself. No, it's I learned this. Even
Yeah.
if I failed 5 different ways, I learned 5 ways this doesn't work.
Yeah.
And that's exciting to me.
That is so exciting. I love what you're saying. I mean, one of the things I think we need to allow our kids space to do is to fail. And that's why I keep honing in on the scientific method. It's such a great tool to go, I didn't fail, I just learned another way that doesn't work. But just as far as having a growth mindset, I know when I was going through school as a kid, if you failed, you were a loser. like you got put in the lower group, or like people looked at you bad, like, oh, that was a problem. But really, you can't learn if you don't fail. So you keep mentioning self-learner, which the term is autodidact. And really, that is the number one thing our kids need to have when they leave our homeschools is the ability to be a self-learner, because we're in the fourth industrial revolution. Our kids are going to have on average 13 jobs over the course of their lifetime, and it could be in completely different industries. So if they can be a self-learner and have some, nimbleness and be able to pivot quickly, they're going to be just like so well equipped, even if they didn't have all the science classes or all the history classes. And I love how you're focusing on reading, writing, and arithmetic, because really it's literacy. The basics of all civilization, right, is being literate. You mentioned home and homeschool. Tell us about that, because I love how this is behind everything you do, and it's just such a beautiful vision.
You know how we all have those pivotal moments in our lives where we look back and we go, this is when everything changed.
Yeah.
This heart and this movement comes out of that. When my daughter was 6, the first one I was homeschooling, she was crying and I was also crying about her struggle with reading. And I was thinking that I was failing her because she was behind. And I was ready to give up. I was literally waiting for my husband to come home from work so he could keep her and the toddler so I could go down to the school and unwind this grievous mistake that I had made a year earlier.
Yeah.
And that was how I was looking at it. I was so devastated. And
Mhm.
I had just joined Facebook like 2 weeks earlier. It's so funny because I was a late adapter. I just didn't want to live my life online. I've always been that way.
Mhm.
Um, Online business is great. I love this
Yeah.
kind of thing, but I didn't want to just fill my days with it. I wanted to stay present with my kids. And I had just joined and I heard this little ding pop up, and it was a local homeschooling mom that I had briefly met a couple weeks earlier, just saying, "Hey, how's your homeschool day going?" And
Yeah.
I told her, I, I told her everything. I told her that I was crying and my daughter was crying and we hated it. And it was not for us. And it was super nice of her to have reached out. Thank you very much. But I am not going to be one of your homeschool mom friends because I'm not going to be a homeschool mom much longer. And she was like, "Is that really what you want?" And I was like, "Well, no, I would have liked to have not failed at this. But that ship has sailed. My daughter is now behind. She'll probably never graduate. She'll probably end up homeless. Like, my brain just made it so big." And she was like, "Stop and breathe, you know,
Uh-huh.
stop and breathe." And she said, "Why are you doing this? Why did you start homeschooling?" And I said, "Well, I only have so many years with my daughter before she's launched into the world, and I didn't want to waste any of them."
Yeah.
And that was really what it came down to for me. It was relationship and discipleship. And she said, "Are you willing to give that up just because you're having a hard time teaching her CBC words?" And I was like, well,
That kind of
no,
puts it in perspective.
you know.
Yeah.
um, and she walked me back through our day. And so,
Mhm.
well, what happened earlier today? And I realized that my daughter and I had gotten into a little bit of a power struggle over breakfast. And so when we came to the homeschool table an hour later, she was still a little put out with me.
Yeah.
I mean, the power struggle was I didn't want her to wear her cereal bowl on her head. Um, she was convinced it was like an essential part of her outfit, but it still had the cereal in it. And I was very opposed to that. And so we got into it. And looking back now, I'm like, man, I should have just let her dump it on her head and given her a bath, right? It
When
would have
we're
been,
when we're new young moms, these
it
things feel so important.
was huge.
Yeah.
But I realized in that moment that I could not separate my mom role in her life from my teacher role in her life because I was still the same person to her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, what we do in our home, the culture we create in our home, the relationship we cultivate as a parent, it cannot exist in a vacuum separate from being a teacher and running a homeschool. This is not my job. It's part of my identity.
Yeah.
Just like being a student isn't my child's job, it's part of their identity right now.
Yeah.
And when we put it in the framework of home and family, every moment we spend at home, every engagement we have as a team that is a family together, that affects and informs how our children respond to us during homeschooling.
Yeah.
And because they're like this, we cannot separate them.
Hmm.
And that's the main driver behind me keeping a curriculum down to a small portion of our day because I don't want to spend all day saying focus, focus,
Yeah.
focus, let's get it done. I want them to explore and enjoy and become. And I
Yeah.
want them to know that I'm their biggest cheerleader,
Mhm.
not their biggest barrier or
Yeah.
boundary, you
Mhm.
know?
I do. I love it. I love it. Um, I think there's this pushback now with I've heard this a lot in the last couple of weeks from people who say homeschool parents, their whole identity is their kids. And
Yeah.
people might hear a little bit of that in what you're saying, but I don't think it's the same at all. I think you're saying our identity is people who live in a home with family, and those relationships are so important on this earth and eternally, and we need to invest in them well. But that doesn't mean that life isn't seasonal and things change. I mean, the time before when you just had one kid and a toddler is way different than when you have eight kids. So when you say it's all about your kids, no, it's all about your family. And the seasons are different every other year, maybe every 6 months, right? Like we don't stay static just because we're intentionally investing in our home. And so I just want to
No,
address that head on because I think that's really I think that's people trying to say, I couldn't homeschool because I want this identity as a businesswoman or have my own self. And you don't lose yourself as a mom or a wife or a parent. It's just another piece of who you are, right?
well, yeah, but it's the same thing like with a friend, right? When I meet my friend after work for, a coffee or something, and we hang out and I talk about my husband because I'm still a wife.
Yeah,
Even though I'm out with her, I'm still a wife. It's part of my identity. I'm still a mom. It's part of my identity.
yeah,
I'm still somebody who runs an online company.
yeah,
That's a part of my identity.
yeah,
And I don't stop being any one of those things just because
mhm,
I'm doing something else.
yeah,
Just like also being her friend is part of my identity.
yeah.
So yeah, in addition to homeschooling my kids, I have coffee dates with friends when I have time. I'm learning to raise backyard chickens. I'm oh my goodness, it's so much fun. Um, I am also learning how to play the guitar,
Yeah,
and I'm learning how to build websites because I want my website to be even better than it is.
yeah,
And I'm doing these things because I can, but there were seasons where I couldn't.
yeah,
And I don't mean sacrificing who you are. I think that movement that's focusing on that is talking to women who gave up their identity in the bigger sense.
yeah.
They started defining themselves by what they did
Hmm.
and seeing their value in their child's behavior
Yeah.
and the byproduct. And that's a lot of pressure for your
Oh
kid
my
too.
gosh. And
I
for
don't
you,
advocate that at all.
yeah. Yeah, don't do it because
No.
you're only called to be faithful. You're not called to determine outcomes. And I think when we get those confused, we can I mean, you could just shut down because it's too overwhelming. If we have to control what another person decides or what they end up being or doing, who would ever take on parenting, right? It just yeah, we're all out on that one. So, yeah, I love how you made that distinction between your identity and the things that you do. Um, very lovely. So your curriculum is the moments at home, and you have curriculum available for toddlers through early elementary at this point, right?
Right now we have first grade out and second grade is under development and will be out this summer before next school year. And
Awesome.
we're already working on our third grade scope and sequence.
I
So
love
we are
that.
continuing to grow all the way up through through elementary school.
Yeah.
I do want to say I don't think toddlers and preschoolers should be sitting in front of curriculum.
Mhm.
But as a mom of eight, I cannot tell you the number of times I've said, "Can I do?" Heard, "Can I do school?"
Yeah.
And we
Yes.
wanted to
Yes.
create something that they could do.
Yeah.
But we also understand there are parents that live in places where kids need to do those things
Yeah.
qualify. Like their school has, believe it or not, there are places where there are standards for kindergarten. Like before your kid comes to kindergarten, they have to do this.
Yeah.
And those parents need these resources. So our desire was to create something
Yeah.
for those younger siblings that want to do school,
Yeah.
but also for those parents who have that need,
Yeah.
right? Like this is a space that we hold open, understanding that everybody walks a different walk.
Yeah.
And so
I
just
love
because
it.
it's there doesn't mean you have to use it.
Yeah, I think it's so helpful for those moms who are homeschooling while working too, especially if you're working at home and you have littles. It can be so, their attention span is so much shorter, and you don't want to just put them in front of a screen. But these are really great activities that you can do with them, or even an older sibling might really have a lot of fun doing. I know our fifth, she was she wanted to do school at 2 because everybody else was doing school and she felt so left out. So I did a lot of printing in those years. She made her own little notebook of like, when we were studying the kings and queens, she had her own little notebook of kings and queens that she colored and glued and all the things. So, yeah, if you have a kid who's like that, definitely feed that desire. You want to see your kid as an individual. And so these resources are available to you to really see your kid as an individual and feed the needs that they have as a person. Um, so you're gonna develop this curriculum up through 6th grade.
That is what we're working on. Yeah, we have an amazing team. We have public school teachers, curriculum developers, and homeschool moms all working together
Yeah.
um, to create this resource that hits standards because every state has different
Yeah.
standards. We want parents to feel confident. Of course, it's up to them to do that research,
Yeah.
but we want to do our best to bring them something with excellence.
Yeah.
We're in the process of working with a reading person to
Ooh.
become fully science of reading aligned.
Uh-huh.
We're working with a speech therapist right now and creating resources for those toddler and preschool years for playing that helps with speech development.
Yeah.
We've got some really great science behind it so that you don't have to do this research. All you have to do is download, print, and use.
Yes. I love it. I love it. So they don't even have to buy a physical product and then they can choose the stuff that they want to use.
Yeah.
Love
We
it.
we send it PDFs right to you. You download it, you can look through it, you can cherry pick if you want to.
Mhm.
We've made it super simple. We provide black and white and color versions of all of our core curriculum. And
Mhm.
anything that's not can be just printed black and white if you prefer.
Mhm.
So we really want this to be the easy button that I wished I'd had back
Yeah.
then. That is my whole heart for moms. I don't want any mom to do what I did and lose sleep staying up trying to figure out the next day's homeschool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
I
that
love it.
just isn't necessary today.
Yeah, there's never been a better time to homeschool. So many brilliant homeschool moms like you have said, "Oh, this is what I needed. Let's be the answer to that question and that problem." Um, this has been so fun. We just have so many of the same, philosophies and pedagogy regarding education, especially early education. You mentioned John Holt. I've read all of his books and absolutely love him. I call myself a classical unschooler, and nobody had any clue what that meant. But if you have an hour, I'll tell you all about it. But what is one or a couple books that you would really recommend for parents who are going to homeschool to read?
Oh goodness. Well, I like John Holt, but I think the book that really changed everything for me was Educating the Wholehearted Child by Clay and Sally Clarkson.
Love them. Yeah.
Their book talked about all the different styles, and that was when I realized, and I don't remember if she said it or if I just had this epiphany when I was reading it, but I could see one kid in one style and one kid in another style
Mhm.
in the
Yeah.
way that they flourished. And I was like, I can do this.
Yeah.
Right? Like I can just take all these styles and I can just be one. I don't need to say, oh, I'm Charlotte Mason. Oh, I'm Montessori.
Yeah.
I'm Waldorf, right?
Yeah.
There are some great resources out there for each of them. And I would say my younger kids are probably all products of a Montessori lifestyle. Our
Yeah.
6-year-old can make entire meals because she
Yeah.
wanted to learn how to cook.
Yeah.
So
Love
that's
it.
what we do, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
But my older ones, I have a Charlotte Mason educated child, but I also have a Waldorfish, you
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
educated child. And that book was really instrumental for me.
Love it. I'll put it in the show notes. And what's one thing you want homeschoolers to know? How long, and you've homeschooled for quite a while now. I think I missed it at the beginning. How long?
Well, our oldest is 21 this year. So
So a while.
yeah,
Yeah.
16 years of homeschooling. We're about to graduate our third.
Yeah. And what's one thing you would want homeschoolers to know?
I think the most important thing to remember is that the education is important, but
Hmm.
their relationship is the most important.
Hmm.
And to just cultivate that relationship with your child and make this as enjoyable as possible. That's not to say they won't have to do hard things,
Yeah.
but in those early years, because that's where I love my heart is with those preschool, kindergarten, first
Yeah.
graders. Teach them to love learning. And if they are connected to you and they're enjoying the process, they will continue to love it all the way through.
Yeah. I love it. And that's going to just give them tools they need to succeed as young adults in this crazy disrupted world that we live in. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me. It has been delightful talking to you. And you guys, we will put links to her business and the references that she's mentioned in the show notes. So be sure to check those out, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.